Thank you everybody for being with us today as well. We'll go ahead and pretty much get started. I first wanted to kind of talk through some of the things that we're going to go through in the training today. First of all, I want to show you guys sort of what's new in the product, what's kind of best practices and how to take advantage of the newest features that we have. So I want to talk you through some of those things. And then I also kind of just want to talk you through what a realistic day in the life of a cybersecurity operator looks like. Sometimes things can seem complicated, especially in the world of cybersecurity. So I think, being able to have sort of a practical understanding of how to use the Lumu tool on a day-to-day basis is quite helpful. So we're going to go through what that looks like. And then lastly, just sort of best practices with the tool, taking advantage of Lumu in a way that makes most sense for you and for your business needs, really. So I'm going to just show you a few different features in the portal and sort of talk you through how you can take advantage of those to operate more efficiently, effectively, and improve your whole SecOps practice, really. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Now, I know there's a mix of people who know about Lumu, who maybe don't know as much about Lumu. So I have a couple of slides because I do want to contextualize a little bit about what you're going to be seeing in the portal today. And I want you to, just understand a little bit about what Lumu does. So just a couple of slides to explain that. Basically, what Lumu does is it gets all of your noisy network metadata, right? Networks are diverse, they're complex. There's a lot of different intricacies and different components that make up the network. And again, everyone's network is different, right? And everyone's network inevitably makes a lot of noise. Network metadata is notoriously noisy. There's a lot to parse through. There's a lot to understand. And the reality is that attackers go through the network to launch attacks. All of these attacks that you see in the media, all of these attacks that you read about that are happening, they originate within the organization's network. That's why having that visibility into the network is so crucial and is so important. And that's what Lumu does. We take all of the signals and we make sense of all of the data that's being produced by your network, and we put that in a very easy to understand and easy to action on way through the portal, for example. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today, is all of that network metadata that we've gathered and interpreted and actioned on for you, how that's presented in the portal, and really how that process works. And just to contextualize a little bit further than what you're seeing there. So this is Lumu in action. These are the different steps that we take to make sure that we are actioning on confirmed compromise. So we do a whole process of collecting and analyzing all that noisy network metadata. We're specialized in looking for methods, tactics, techniques that attackers use to be as accurate as possible in identifying these threats in the network. Once we've identified that something malicious is happening, we're going to report that to you, and we're going to see that today. And then we're going to initiate auto response with the tools in your cyber stack, whether that be your firewall, any kind of perimeter defense solution, whether it's like a ZTNA kind of tool or a SDP, firewalls, things like that, EDRs. So we work with your other tools to stop that threat in real time. So at least to mitigate it, to stop that threat and that threat actor from moving further across the network. So we leverage that security stack. And then ultimately, contain and block that threat. So this is sort of the process and the flow that you see, and then you're going to see quite a bit in the Lumu portal. So again, I just want to contextualize this. I know we have a mix of people who know about Lumu and those who maybe don't know as much. So I wanted to share that with you before we go into the training. And as Sonia mentioned, throughout the training, if you do have a question, we're likely going to answer them at the end. But feel free to drop any question about anything that you're seeing during the training or any question that you have about Lumu at all, either using the Q&A feature, or you can just drop it in the chat to me, whatever works, and we will try to answer those at the end. So let me go ahead and share my other screen here so we can take a look at the Lumu portal. All right, so here we have the Lumu portal. Again, first and foremost, I wanted to just walk you guys through the portal a little bit, but I wanted to talk through some of the newest features that we have available within the portal, some of the things that the product team has added in here that just make life a little bit easier, and that are new additions. So first we'll go to the collectors section. One of the newer things that we have here at Lumu, what we try to do is provide metadata collector options depending on how, again, networks are diverse, they're different, and depending on your network, you may have the ability to deploy collectors maybe through gateways, virtual appliances, agents, APIs, and then most recently we added this log forwarder feature. So the log forwarder feature is our newest metadata collector method that we have available in the portal. And really what this does, it's a more flexible approach for maybe organizations that don't have the ability to set up a virtual appliance, for example. So this gives you, again, just another way and another option to collect all of that network metadata, depending on your environment, depending on your network, and what's practical and what makes most sense for your organization. So it's fairly easy to enable and to activate here in the portal. We have installers for Windows, for Linux, and for Windows. You also have kind of help documentation to get started in this installation process. It's fairly intuitive, and I'll walk you through that. The Log4j agent supports these metadata collectors in Linux and Windows, so with these technologies. And so basically what you'll do is you will install your installer for Windows, for example. You have the online installer, and then you have the offline installer. These are two different options here. But basically the offline installer is good for bulk deployments, for example. So once you download that, that installer, basically what you're going to do is you're going to add an agent. So here you're going to name the agent. I'm going to name this one production environment, and I'm going to assign it a label. We'll get into labels in a little bit, but basically you're going to assign it a label that helps you identify this particular, where the metadata is coming from in the organization, so that you can prioritize when incidents are coming maybe from a certain area of the business. So we're going to assign it the production label. Let's say this is our production environment, for example, and we create our log forwarder agent. Now, this is pretty important. When you have created your log forwarder agent, you'll want to copy this code and make sure that you save it somewhere for that activation. Basically, what you're going to see is that you're going to have a Windows, when you have the Windows agent installer downloaded, you're going to copy that code and you're going to enter the activation code here in the Windows agent installer. Let me just make sure that I can share my whole screen so you can see it better this way. All right. All right, you should be able to see the installer. So that's where you're going to enter that activation code, and you're basically going to follow all of the steps of the installer to complete the downloading of that agent. Okay, so that's how you activate the agent itself. It's very straightforward. It's super intuitive. Again, copy paste that code in here, follow all of the steps. So that. Now, once you have your log forwarders created, you're going to go here. Sorry, this is my demo environment, and I was doing some testing earlier. But here I have my production environment that I've just created. That agent was added. Let's say, I've activated it. And basically within this agent, you're going to go ahead and add different collectors. Now, these collectors, you can, again, name for whichever technology, or maybe you may want to identify it by like the technology type. So let's say this is your FortiGate collector. Maybe you want to call it FortiGate collector. And you'll enter all of the information there within the technology, and you'll be able to create it from there. Now, if you go back to your log forwarders and this particular production environment, one of the other things that we've added recently is the ability to do data grouping rules. So you can associate, again, this is where the labels really come into play. And I'll explain, the labels in just a second. But basically, what you're able to do is group different IP addresses here so that you can identify the traffic coming from those IP addresses and assign them a label. And again, what this helps you do is just prioritize incidents that are affecting a certain label or a certain environment, for example, so that when an incident does happen, and let's say it's affecting that environment, we'll see in just a bit in the incidents view how you can filter by labels, how you can filter by prioritization. So that's why labels and data grouping is really important here. So you can enter the IPs that you want to enter here, and then you can enter a group of IPs as well, for example, and a range, and you can either assign it a label, as mentioned, or you can actually include it you can actually identify this group of IPs as excluded activity. What does excluded activity mean? Well, basically, with all of the different collectors that we have, not just for the log forwarders, but also for the virtual appliances, the gateways, for all of that, you can create these data grouping rules that will exclude activity from these IP addresses. Now, this isn't something that you want to do for everything, but maybe there's a certain environment where you do some kind of testing, or some kind of again, like a production environment where you're doing some testing and you don't want to look at the traffic coming from maybe a certain group of IP addresses. You can exclude that traffic so it's not making a lot of noise in the Lumu portal and getting in your way there, for example. So you have that option to exclude activity from certain metadata, from certain IP addresses within collectors, if that makes sense. And again, not only within the log forwarders, but within the virtual appliances too. So if you have a certain virtual appliance that's set up, you can go in here and you can actually go to manage rules and create more rules for example, for that use case. Let's say you want to exclude certain addresses here, and you will go to excluded activity and save it. And so now for that metadata collector, you can always do that. So even if you have something that's already created and active, you can go back and add these rules. So again, it's a new feature, something that is pretty helpful, again, for those situations where you may have a test environment or some kind of a production environment that's maybe making a lot of noise. So it's a pretty helpful tool that a lot of our customers are getting a lot of out of lately. So the next thing I wanted to show you guys is, again, you have all of your metadata collectors. That's how you collect that metadata. That's kind of the first step in identifying malicious activity and that illumination flow and the illumination process. But then you also have your integrations. We've added a few integrations that are new lately. We have a couple under the response area. We have Cisco Secure Endpoint. So you can just in a few clicks integrate Lumu for response with Cisco Secure Endpoint. And we also have the WatchGuard Firebox one that we just added yesterday. So new integrations, out of the box integrations. We have a lot more integrations that are also API, which you can find in our doc store that we'll link to you in just a little bit. So you can see all of our integrations that aren't just the out of the box. Basically, the benefit and the difference is that here, these out of the box integrations in the portal, in just a few clicks, you have this integrated with your whatever solution it is. So you select the different threat types that you want this integration to respond to. Sorry, it's a demo environment acts up sometimes. Let me just go back. And so again, as I was mentioning, it's just a few clicks and you can activate this integration. So that's really the difference between these out of the box integrations and the API ones, or the ones that you'll find in the doc store that we have a lot more of as well. So it's just basically the public key that you'll enter here, it's just a couple of steps and you have your integration activated. So that's really the benefit and the biggest, really the biggest benefit with these out of the box integrations. So for data collection, again, to collect metadata from these different environments in just a few clicks. For response, to be able to respond automatically to any compromise, any malicious threats that Lumu might find in just a few clicks with these. And then for SecOps, our SecOps integrations are constantly growing as well. Our newest one is the Google Chat integration, where all Lumu incidents and alerts are going to be integrated into Lumu chat channels and spaces as designated by the team. So this really helps with cross-team collaboration, with informing different members of the team, maybe within a chat, about what's going on with a particular threat or with a particular incident, so that you can kind of track it in those spaces. And then also for SecOps, you have PSA tools and different collaboration tools, SIEMs, for example. Even we've seen situations with MDR tools where we'll feed incident data to those tools as well. And really what our SecOps integrations aim to do is to keep everyone on your team informed about what's happening, but also to integrate with the other tools that you have for security operations, for day-to-day operations, informed with the compromises that Lumu is identifying across the network. So it's just really about, and our integrations in general are really about bringing your cyber stack together and making sure that we're sort of that glue that brings all of those disparate solutions and tools together and as one. So you have this really powerful platform that you're able to connect, cross-connect and collaborate through Lumu, really. All right, so that's really the latest and greatest with integrations. All right, so now that we've been over what's newest in the product, I thought it would be pretty helpful to talk a little bit about what the day-to-day operation of Lumu looks like. I know typically when you log into the Lumu portal, you'll start here in the overview tab. But I think on a day-to-day basis, and with so many customers that I talk to, I think the incidents tab is really where they spend the majority of their time. Of course, as a Lumu customer, whenever something new happens, whenever a new threat is found, or whatever the case might be, you're going to get an email notification about it. So you're going to know that this is happening. But you'll go, your next step is probably that you're going to go into the Lumu portal and just see a little bit more about this, right? So really, as a day-to-day cybersecurity operator, you're going to want to come here into the incidents view, and you're going to want to prioritize, right? You're going to want to prioritize based on the number of contacts that you're seeing with a particular threat and the number of endpoints that it's affecting. So if you sort by those two things, that's really the best way to prioritize new incidents that are found and to focus on maybe what's most important in that moment. So here you see this attack here right at the top, this IOC from the malware family. It looks like it's a command and control incident and malware. The relevance is high because this label, which we'll go into at the end with some best practices that I have, but basically this label is a high priority label. And there's 4 endpoints and 93 contacts across those 4 endpoints, which is showing some persistence and perhaps some lateral movement around the network. So this is an incident that maybe you're going to want to go take a look at when you log into the portal in terms of prioritization. So here within the incident view, many of you who do use the tool day to day are familiar with how it looks. But basically what you're seeing in this incident view is you have the IOC up here. So you have the IOC name or IP or whatever the case might be. Then you have a general description of that. This one's a malware, Trojan. Again, command and control malware. That's definitely showing some intent there and some potential lateral movement across the network with that number of contacts and what we saw. The good thing about this is that it was automatically responded to. And I think that's why integrations are just so key and so important, especially those response integrations. To be able to respond automatically to these threats in real time is the key, because at least you're taking care and you're containing this threat so that it stops spreading across the network. So you're taking that initial action. As you can see in the operation timeline, you can see the series of events here. So the first threat contact happened, April 30th at 1:30. And right, as you can see here, within milliseconds, this was contained, automatically responded to with the firewalls, and the firewall integrations there. So that automated response, once it takes place, at least it gives you a little bit of a breather so that you can further investigate what's happening here. So of course, as a cybersecurity operator, you're going to want to potentially remediate this threat. You're going to want to perhaps look at those endpoints that were affected and involved in this incident, and you're going to want to learn a little bit more about them. Looks like it probably started with with this device. And if you click on the endpoint, you can see the source that it came from. So it came from this metadata collector, which was a virtual appliance firewall in this case. The name of the collector, you're going to see the endpoint IP address of that device. You're going to see the action taken by Lumu, which was to block the threat and block that activity through the integration, of course, and then the destination of that malicious actor. All of these, and this is the same that you're going to see with all these different endpoints affect the same kind of data here, the same kind of information and context. Now it's just showing you what happened with each and every contact that was taking place with this threat actor. That's really just what you're seeing here. So if you click on more details, you have a lot more information that's provided usually by the metadata collector. It gives you the UUID, the details, just endpoint IP, a lot of different information there that you can refer to as well during your investigation and during your remediation efforts. And then here in the highlights tab, you just learn a little bit more about how that threat has been moving. This is really just about activities that we've seen within that particular threat, automated responses that have taken place as well, and then labels that were affected, labels which are maybe particular areas of the business. So you can maybe get an understanding for, okay, maybe this malicious actor was trying to target the administrative side of the business or the production side of the business or whatever the case might be, however you labeled it. In this case, in this example, the administrative label has a high risk level. So, that's again, another reason why we dug deeper into this incident in the first place in that day-to-day. So all of this is just context. All of this in the highlights tab is just kind of timestamp context. And then the threat intelligence is where you can get more information about the IOC. So you have, the threat triggers here. So you have more information about those IPs. Then you have related files here. So the files or binaries in the device that were trying to contact that adversary. So you can really narrow down your focus in the remediation efforts. And then we have related resources, which are typically publicly available articles and information about how to potentially tackle this threat, in this case, a quackbot threat. And then, of course, we have the attack matrix, which shows you with the MITRE attack matrix and all of the steps needed to fully execute an attack, the initial access techniques that were used potentially to then move on to all the different phases of the attack, which is what the threat actor intends to do. So it looks like this could have been maybe a spear phishing kind of situation, something related to that. And then this really shows you the tactics and techniques that the threat actor is going to use with this particular threat. So that's just highlighting that so that you can understand how this threat actor moves and basically be able to maybe take actions on other areas of your cyber stack and just better understand how the attacker is moving. Now that's really it. Like, as a cybersecurity operator, again, I think the biggest thing is containing that threat initially, which is done automatically by Lumu. And then the next step is that remediation, which here in the incident, you have all of the context that you need. You can pretty much export everything here to then further your investigation and maybe go to those particular endpoints and see what it is that might be happening to fully remediate that threat. So that's really what the day-to-day looks like within the portal. Now, there are some other tips and tricks. There are things that I think are very helpful that I like to remind our customers about and anybody really. I think when you're operating the tool, it's just kind of easy to get caught up in the what you know. But I think there's a lot of different helpful capabilities within the incident view that help you be faster and get to higher priority incidents more quickly. And I think the filters here, if you're not taking advantage of these, you certainly should. I think if you're trying to investigate maybe a particular endpoint, a specific endpoint, you can search by the endpoint name or IP address to see if maybe it's involved in another threat or something. Maybe you want to look at a certain label, a particular label that you have created and see, attacks or incidents that are targeting that label. So the filters, I would say this is one of the best prioritization tools that we have within the Lumu portal, being able to narrow your focus to a particular maybe threat actor, again, label or area of the business, number of contacts, or a specific device even. So I think taking advantage of the labels is incredibly important. And the filters is incredibly important. I always like to remind people that they're here and that's a really helpful tool. Now, the other thing that I think is pretty key is also taking action on your incidents. I think it's just kind of a day-to-day operational hygiene kind of thing. If you're done with an incident, if you've reviewed it, if that, let's say, automated action has taken place, it's good practice to take action on the incident and close the incident. Or even, you can mute the incident, start working on it, comment on it. But it's good to take these actions. It keeps the team organized. It keeps everybody on the same page about what we're working on today or what we're focusing on. Or maybe if you leave a comment, maybe it's about we want to review further. It's just a good way to, again, keep everybody on the same page and to operate the tool with success. So I think closing, muting, commenting, really just the incident management component here is pretty important and pretty key in keeping this incidents view different than our demo environment, for example. So it's a good best practice there. The other thing I wanted to kind of go over is the distribution tab. I think this is helpful when you're, again, trying to maybe narrow your focus to a particular endpoint. The distribution tab is it's just another way to visualize malicious activity and how it's maybe impacting different endpoints or assets in the organization. So here's where you're going to see endpoints by the number of, adversary attempts to that device. So you'll see the endpoint. If you click on it here, you'll get a bit more context and information about how threat actors have been trying to interact with that endpoint. So again, it helps you prioritize. It shows you by the ones that are most targeted at the top. And then, so again, it's just another way to visualize malicious activity. Everything's in the incidents view. This is just best practices and just another way to visualize and to see. But maybe, and you can go back in time as well. And so you'll be able to see maybe over the last 30 days or the last 7 days, whatever the case might be, you can narrow your focus to particular endpoints that seem to be trending and seem to be maybe a popular target for attackers. So this is just another way to kind of narrow your focus and be able to maybe pay a little bit more attention to a particular endpoint that may be, again, pretty attractive to attackers. So I like to always mention that. You can download all the contacts here to a CSV file. So for your, threat hunting activities or whatever the case might be, you can narrow down all that data there. The other thing is that's kind of, again, big picture sort of threat hunting tool is the MITRE ATT&CK global matrix. Now, this one is different than the MITRE ATT&CK matrix that I showed you within the incident. The MITRE global matrix is going to basically show you, based on all of the different incidents that Lumu has detected over time, what the most popular tactics and techniques that attackers are using to target your organization specifically. So again, this is going to help understand how are attackers targeting my organization, and it's going to help you also build maybe strategies and ideas about how to better protect the organization and maybe cover some gaps that might be exposed. So for example, in this case, you have the initial access as spear phishing attachment seems to be the most popular way that attackers are targeting. So you click on that, you'll learn a little bit more about it. You have links here to pretty much all of the resources to the MITRE ATT&CK matrix directly to learn more about the technique. And then, you just have as much context as you need here to be able to take action, really. Below, it's the same information, but shown in a heat map. So it's just another way to visualize what you're seeing above. But this is a very good, feature that we have in the portal that is good for, follow-up activity to just understand, for just general, maybe cyber hygiene and so forth, to just make sure that you're doing what you need to do to protect your organization, to close those gaps and potentially close those doors that attackers seem to be using and going through to target your organization. Now, there's one more best practice that, I've mentioned a lot throughout the training, and it's the labels. As you saw in the incident, you see higher priority activity and maybe lower priority activity, and that's all labeled. And labels are, again, all associated with those collectors that we were looking at earlier. It's just a way to identify network traffic, identify where an attack is maybe targeting or focusing in on. So creating these labels, when you add a different label here, you just give it a name. We will call it this, medium, and create. Okay. Okay, well, we'll do that. All right, so now that you have your label there, you can go in here. You can always edit or delete the label, but basically what you'll do is in your metadata collectors, you can add those labels to be able to, again, identify traffic coming from particular environments in these data grouping rules, so that you can know where that's coming from, which areas of the business certain traffic is affecting, so on and so forth. So it's just a good way to stay organized. It's a good way to prioritize, again, back in the incidents view and the filtering. It's, again, very helpful to be able to narrow your focus in on, particular area of the business that might be targeted. Now, there's one more thing that I want to show you guys, and it's very accessible and available to you. We have our support available here. You can always open a support ticket here in the portal. And you just, enter your information here, you submit that, and our support team can help you. So if it's setting up a metadata collector, response integration, whatever the case might be, we're here, 100% to help you be successful and do this easily. Everything in the portal is incredibly easy. It's intuitive. But we have a ton of documentation about how to get started. Docs.lumu.io. I'll send it in the chat in a little bit, or maybe Sonia will send it, but it's a very, very helpful resource. It's really good to have on hand, that you can access all of our different articles here, whether that's deploying metadata collectors. It goes into a lot of detail about how to do that. Whatever the case might be, you can even search a certain integration, let's say Fortinet. And we'll give you all the information here about how to configure, in this case, the Lumu log forwarder for FortiAnalyzer. So everything is designed to be easy for you to do, but if you ever need help along the way, that is accessible here in the portal. So I always like to remind people that support is available, our Dockster is available, and we're here to help you along the way.